Rachel here. Welcome to my Slow TV Stitchery. Good morning, everybody. Onward we go. Occasionally getting ourselves tied in knots. We've had an attempt at snow overnight. Not what you would call a very enthusiastic attempt. We've certainly seen more. But the people coming back from the shops are crunching over the pavements, so more than there's been for a while. That is meant to be this colour. It's very satisfying to see the gold spreading over this canvas. When you consider when I was doing it the first time round, it just didn't seem to make progress at all. But I think this is one of those patterns that you really do need to get comfortable with. It's not especially complicated, but there are a couple of points which can easily go astray. And working out the way to think of it that best suits your own mind is, if you like, the key that unlocks progress, and particularly progress without anguish, perhaps I should say. I was making progress before, it just didn't feel like it. But now I have a better understanding of the pattern. And that has just helped everything ease off. So I have moved on from she-wolves, the early medieval queens of England, to a book endeavouring to find out about the adventures of a medieval knight called Sir John de Mandeville, who was indeed a descendant of that Geoffrey de Mandeville who caused such trouble in the anarchy and died excommunicate, and wasn't buried until the Templars took pity on him. And he's buried in Temple Church in London, where William Marshall is buried. But Sir John wrote a travelogue. He went on pilgrimage to Jerusalem, and then ostensibly he went on and into India and China, and his adventures there are a very odd mix of plausible and entirely implausible, along with a few things that are a bit like some of the details in the Brendan Voyage. Makes sense if you can think of things in a slightly different way. When Tim Severin made a skin boat and took the stepping stone route from the Atlantic coast of Ireland up through Orkney and Shetland and the Faroes and Iceland to Greenland in the wake of St. Brendan the Navigator, he found that there were things in the Navigatio which sounded like medieval credulity. But when you're actually sailing, you look at things and think, oh, they saw a lot more whales and porpoises than a modern boat would. And he thought this might relate to the fact that a skin boat is so much quieter and it moves a bit like a whale. There's a sense of breathing in the way the frame flexes. So maybe the animals were just curious, and they had a lot of visits from an assortment of sea creatures, some of which were more unnerving than others. And that's also true. Sea in a skin boat than you are in most modern boats, and even quite a small whale is a lot bigger than you are. And then again, they talked about pillars of crystal. Well, some ice is clearer than others, and you get all sorts of different colours in the pack ice, apparently. So, yes, he came to the conclusion that perhaps there was more that was real and sensible than at first appeared, particularly because as moderns we are a little inclined to dismiss medieval people as being superstitious and credulous, and we tend not to give them the credit for knowing even what they knew. And it's the same with John de Mandeville. Don't think there's anything one can say for Geoffrey. Stabled his horses in Ramsey Abbey, which is not the action of a good Christian gentleman of his time. Although I suppose one should admit that during the anarchy there were additional pressures, shall we say. Anyway, back to Sir John. There are even details about the pilgrimage part of it which people have expressed doubt about. And yet, author who was doing the research found that he had been more accurate, in fact, than he was given credit for. On the other hand, he came to the conclusion that he didn't believe that John de Mandeville had actually gone beyond Jerusalem. There were people who had. There were other people who had travelled from Europe as far as China and back again. Missions to the Great Khan and missions to various other people. And there was, of course, the legend of Prester John, so everyone was interested in finding this great Christian empire. I think they thought founded by St. Thomas, Doubting Thomas, who apparently went and converted India. So everyone wanted to find Prester John and enter into diplomatic relations with that empire. So there were people who had been to various places far east and written about them, so it's entirely feasible that the second part of Sir John's book was written from existing sources of his time, just improved. He was at one time credited with being the father of English literature, which is saying something when you consider that he's actually before Chaucer. And now we're back in the medieval again, aren't we? They do seem to have had a firm grip on how to celebrate and rejoice, don't they? Not something the medievals had trouble with. I recognise the voice here, so I would say this is Cantu. I've forgotten the name of the founder, but that was definitely her voice. Thinking for next year I might actually go through my Christmas playlist and maybe tweak the order a little bit, and even remove from my Christmas stitching playlist those elements that just are a little bit too leisurely and somehow make it disconcerting or hard to concentrate. One doesn't want to be stitching to a jig all the time, and it's not working music in the sense of the old sea shanties. But I am coming to the conclusion that I have requirements of stitching music. And they don't include the sudden feeling of deceleration when you go from one of the lively medieval renditions to a full cathedral choir showing just how good they are, or possibly in the Victorian tradition being reverential, which I've always felt is a slightly irreligious attitude to be. It's one of lack of understanding, perhaps. Reverence is one thing, being reverential is something slightly different. That's all for this session. I hope you enjoyed following along. Happy stitching!